Hello, Tim, and welcome to the second part of my news update, Ukraine war news update for the 23rd of July, 2023. Sorry, I had to take a break between the recording of the first and second parts. I had to go to an AGM for my son's sports club, so it's a bit random. But I'm back. It's a bit later. What has happened on the front line? Let's go to the front lines. That's where we are due to go to next. In the Svatova axis, that is Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea in the Luhansk up into Kharkiv Oblast in the northeast of the country. Fighting is actively taking place on the west bank of the Zherebets River near Karmazianivka. So this is a place that's going to feature quite a bit today and in my frontline update. The Russian forces have taken the fighting inside the forest belt. Russians are trying to reach the strategical heights near Cherneschinina, or something like that. So they are forcing their way across the Zherebets River onto high ground, taking control over some forest areas around there. This is what Andrew Perpetua has mapped it as over the last sort of 3 or 4 days. Pushed in, took some land, took some more land, and now there's some claims of land below that. Syriac maps and Andrew Perpetua have a bit of disagreement because actually Syriac has the Russians in control of some land to the south of there. Indeed, that's what it looks like for Syriac maps. That's what it looked like yesterday. And now they're claiming it's kind of all joined together and they pushed even further. So Syriac maps says in this area that the Russians have made significant advances during the last few hours, taking control of the hills that overlook Novogorivka, including part of the village itself. As it was said previously, it's very premature to say that this is the beginning of a major Russian offensive. However, Russian forces are exploiting the moment with this new breakthrough and a big use of artillery in comparison to the Ukrainian side in this axis by taking control as much high territory as possible in order to create a solid bridgehead for a future offensive to reach the Oskil River and enter again in the area lost in 2022. I don't know that that's realistic at all for the for the Russians going forward, but this is certainly an area that they are able to exploit at the moment. And also, if we go further to the south, we see the Serebryansky forest just to the southwest of Crimea, where the Ukrainians have ceded some territory to the Russians there. The Russians have advanced in the forest, according to that source. The armed forces of Ukraine, on the other hand, have entered the city of Bakhmut. Recent reports say that they are in the Roses area. That's Rose Valley area. I talked about that yesterday, which is the center of the city. It's kind of the northwestern part of the city. One more reason to know why the Russians are so mad this night. Well, maybe the Russians are arguably pushing in these sorts of areas precisely because they want to divert Ukrainian attention away from Bakhmut. That is one supposed piece of rationale. Ukrainians slightly advanced on Andriivka, just to the south of Bakhmut. This is Klishchivka, and to the south, Kurdimivka. Between them, there's a little village of Andriivka. 0.8 square kilometers have been added to the liberated status, says Global War Monitor. And then when we come to the south, the Zaporizhia, along to Donetsk line in the south of the country, the Ukrainian army has managed to clear 1.7 square kilometers in a Robotna direction after fierce battles. They fought and counterattacked the area north of Priutne village, and that's come under the control of the Ukrainian army, not the village itself, but the area to the north. The Russians continue to complain that Ukrainian army showers them with gifts of cluster munitions. Fierce fighting continues. Another source, Kenneth Gregg, says things have started to happen on the Zaporizhia front thanks to the cluster munitions east of Priutne. They've advanced 2.5 kilometers wide and 1.5 kilometers deep. Sorry, 2.5 kilometers deep, 1.5 kilometers wide. So there are two things. There are two areas. There's a Robotna, which is further to the west, and then there's Priutne, Velika, Novosilka, Staromyorska area. So this is where now Kenneth Gregg is talking about that he's a Finnish soldier active in Ukraine. And to the west, we just heard about Robotna there, but also Priutne too. So those are two separate areas. He continues, Greg, this has led to the Russians setting up the next defensive line 3 kilometers south of the community. All other front lines are as before, except Orikova Vasilivka. That's to the north of Bakhmut. So he's not talking about uh, entering into Bakhmut itself, but that there's a small advance of a few hundred meters to the north along the road. Um, Oh, no, that's along the road to Bakivka, which is sort of between that kind of Rosali area and the highway further to the north, Zalezhniansky. But I'll show you all this on the map later. Russian so-called massive offensive in Kharkiv Oblast has stalled, arguably not according to Syriac maps, and they have not taken any more ground. Again, arguably not. It's like I said yesterday, the maintenance doesn't work. Speaking of maintenance and depots, we have subjected Crimea to a massive air attack with good results. Several depots and military targets have been hit, and evacuation of civilians has taken place here and there. Many people ask about that. I won't go anymore, other than he just talks a lot about striking logistics lines and so on and so forth that we already know about. So uh, there is activity. There's footage coming out. These are Ukrainian Leopard 2A6 tanks and Bradleys advancing on the Zaporizhia front. I can't timestamp this and don't know that whether it led to anything, but just to say that there is activity in certain areas and there could be some advancing for the Ukrainians. But the main strategy at the moment is still, although there are these flashpoints around Robotna and around Priutne, the main strategy is to kind of sit back and let the artillery do most of the work at the moment still, it seems. A Leopard 2A6 here running into a mine, damage looks minor, patch it up, it's good to go. But that doesn't stop this still being a huge challenge for the Ukrainians. As you can see there, the wheels busted off, and that is a relatively easy fix. You see anti-tank mines there in that area, and a number of them. It's just a massive challenge, isn't it? Of course it is, and that's going to be an ongoing challenge for the Ukrainians as they try to move forward. So things are happening. I don't know. We'll wait and see when I do my frontline update as to how much information we're getting from the frontline. It's been frustratingly coming out in dribs and drabs. That's the nature of war. I mean, it's frustrating for someone sitting on their lazy backside in a room somewhere on the south coast of England, but the reality is it's war, the fog of war, and there's operational security. Okay, Biden administration. So we're going on to military aid now. Biden administration is now strongly committed to not sending long-range missiles to Ukraine, says the Washington Post. It's been this talk for the last couple of days that they've been considering sending ATACMS, and it appears that actually they've decided not to. People are angry with that, saying that actually that could be one way of stopping strikes on Odessa. And I myself this morning said that actually that's the wrong kind of missile to fight back against those strikes. And actually, no reports has come out and said exactly the same thing. But still super useful. It still would be great to have them in Ukrainian hands, these ATACMS and other similar munitions. On the other hand, Ukraine has its own latest air defense system, according to the deputy chairman of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on National Security. So that's House of Parliament, Defense and Intelligence, Chernev. He said that this is not an analog of Patriot SAMP-T or IRIS-T. It's more like Hawk, medium range system. So it's going to be a medium range system that probably has moderate capabilities. They are Ukrainian made and Ukrainian designed. They are being tested quite successfully. The missiles have already been developed. So it'd be interesting to see how quickly they can get these to the front lines. It'd be super useful. They need as many different types and capabilities of air defense as they can get. Ones that are good for shooting down this, ones that are good for shooting down that are cheaper at doing this, cheaper at doing that, or the whole range of different capabilities is what they need. And they are getting it, albeit slowly. Sweden allocated over $570 million to help Ukraine overcome the consequences of Russia's war in a new assistance program for 2023 to 2027. Again, these long-term support schemes put in place. A new aid would support Ukraine's green energy industry, media development, business, and trade. So it's about supporting Ukraine in many different ways to allow it to function as a country so that it can then execute a war as well. It's not just, if you had an army and nothing else, then they need to be self-sufficient so they can fund their own army and their own military project, right? German defense giant Rheinmetall commits to supplying 300,000 35mm munitions for the Gepard air defense systems operated by Ukraine, including 40,000 this year. That is really significant. They have been unable to get hold of ammunition that already exists that the Swiss have control of. The Swiss are refusing to play ball. So Rheinmetall are now making it themselves. Ukraine's military is very satisfied with the 40 systems that Germany has donated so far. And we've talked a lot about the Gepard systems. Most of you know what they are. These sort of auto cannons on a tracked chassis that are effectively sort of obsolete, but now they're not, because actually they're really useful for taking out Shahed drones in particular. British MOD has announced a second group of Ukrainian servicemen has successfully completed training on the AS-90 self-propelled howitzer. These are the UK provided self-propelled howitzers. We were sending, I think it was 33. I don't know if there's any more being sent. I don't know how many have been sent over there already, but there are waves of crew being trained on them. That's fantastic. And then I found this fascinating yesterday. So UK has apparently donated several dozen Wolfram mobile ground-based platforms for Brimstone missiles. Wow. Okay. And right, let's look into these. So Supercat only showed off their demonstrator for this platform late last year. Okay. So UK MOD, Supercat's company, and MBDA, so that's a French munitions company, jointly developed it using lessons learned from Ukraine's employment of Brimstone missiles in 2022 against Russia. So Brimstone are these missiles. I'll show you now to give you an idea. So the Brimstone missile is a ground or air-launched ground attack missile developed by MBDA UK for the UK's Royal Air Force. It was originally intended for fire and forget use against mass formations of enemy armour, using a millimeter wave active radar homing seeker to ensure accuracy even against moving targets. Experience in Afghanistan led the addition of laser guidance in the dual mode Brimstone missile, allowing a spotter to pick out specific and highest priority targets, particularly useful to minimize collateral damage when friendly forces or civilians are in the area. Tandem-shaped warhead, etc., etc. 3 Brimstones are carried on a launcher that occupies a single weapon station. Well, actually, this is all changing now, as we can see from that new vehicle, so on and so forth. So what are the specifications? 6.3 kilogram heat tandem-shaped warhead with a crush fuse, command fuse, operational range. That's what we want. So 20 kilometers from a fixed wing, 12 kilometers from a rotor wing. So from a helicopter, 60 kilometers. Brimstone 2, 60 kilometers from a fixed wing, 40 kilometers from a rotor wing. Supersonic missile. I don't know what the range is from firing from the ground, and I think this is what they've worked on with the Brimstone here and its ability to be used from a vehicle like this. Now, previously we've seen like almost technicals, those sort of trucks being loaded with Brimstone fire launchers in a kind of a bit of innovation, but now this is looking like a specifically designed and manufactured firing facility from a wheeled chassis. So, as I was saying, this was developed by the MOD, Supercat, and MBDA. It was called HMT Overwatch at that point. This is a brand new platform that the British Army hasn't even had a chance to procure yet, and we've sent dozens of them to Ukraine. Very, very bloomin' based. It says Artois here, so happy with that. And in fact, there's an article in The Independent which goes into this. So a B&Q generator, B&Q is a UK, just your general DIY shop. B&Q generator and a commandeered truck behind the British Wolfram vehicles helping Ukraine fight Putin. Let's dip into this quickly. The Wolfram armoured vehicle headed for the armoured column coming from through the valley and fired salvos from its Brimstone missile system, setting the Russian T-57 tank aflame. Further along the front line, a rider on an electronic bike was carrying out a lone attack, hitting the convoy at the flank using a Carl Gustav Mark IV rocket launcher. The operation taking place was a military exercise in Lulworth, Dorset, but the tactics and weapons being used were from the Ukraine war. The Wolfram was developed by the British military in the early days of Vladimir Putin's invasion with an urgent plea for help from Kiev to counter Russian heavy armour. Brimstone would have been ideal ideal for the job, but they were launched from advanced warplanes the Ukrainians did not have. After a weekend of looking at the problem, the boffin I love this. The boffins at the MOD came up with a solution using an office laptop, commandeering a truck, and getting a power generator from a B&Q store. The result was Wolfram, a mobile ground-based platform with its MBDA missile and a Supercat vehicle, which could be used to move around Russian lines to strike at the enemy. It is now standard weaponry for the British military, with possible export orders pending and several dozen of the vehicles already in Ukraine. The electronic bike, supposedly a stealth platform, is a variation of motorcycles Ukrainian forces have been using in the front line. Motorcycles were also used against British and Western forces by the Taliban in Afghanistan and insurgents in Iraq. So it goes on to talk about that. There are other things like an electric motorbike or electric bicycle, electric motorbike, I guess, and so on and so forth. Uh, and this kind of innovation that's been forced through by the Ukraine war, and kind of necessity is the mother of all invention. So, in this case, one of the things that came out of that was this Wolfram Supercat, platform uh, that the Ukrainians have a dozen of, and the British military don't particularly have any of. So that's really good news that has happened, and that they are on the front. Well, I don't know if they're on the front line, but the claim is that they are in America. Ukraine. They're already there. On another subject related to Ukrainian Leopard 2A4 tanks have reportedly arrived at the Bermaledi plant in Poland to get repaired after receiving damage on the Ukrainian front line. What's interesting about the release of this is very much this is where the tank is. There's no secrecy here. This is the shop. This is a repair facility in Poland. Deal with it, Russia, and the support that neighboring nations are giving Ukraine. In the whole, I guess, chain of procurement. They are, and we've just seen the UK designing bespoke stuff, giving that to Ukraine, tanks being given to Ukraine, and then when they need repairing, pulled out by ARVs given to Ukraine or sold to Ukraine or whatever the situation is, and then pulled back to neighboring countries to be fixed, and then sent back to the front line. I mean, this is definitely a cooperative, war effort. This is then the Russian. I mean, this is the only the only source I could find of anything being given to Russia or Russia procuring any kind of equipment here. 6 self-propelled howitzers, about 5 hours of work for the Ukrainian army, says that source. But here are 6 self-propelled howitzers, and I was looking at this going, yeah, I'm not sure they look in particularly good nick either. I mean, one of them's got the back door hanging off, and I don't know where they've got them from, but yeah, they're not. Yeah, that one there, and I don't know. It's just you look at that and thinking, yeah, again, it's an indication. Yeah, I'm sure these can do some damage, but we've already seen they had a bunch of Strela sent to the front line, and of all 6 of them, none of them now work, and that was that was almost straight away. And you look at equipment like that where you got 6 self-propelled howitzers, and you wonder how long they would last on the front line. Anyway, moving on to geopolitical stuff. This is news. We're going to start with news that Poland has deported a Russian tennis player, Vera Zvonareva, after denying her entry into the country at the airport Warszawa, Warsaw. She was trying to enter on a French visa. She was supposed to play at a tournament in Warsaw, but the Polish Ministry of Interior put a stop to that. There's a lot of discussion about sports and about representation, about boycotting and so on and so forth. That will rumble on, no doubt, for a long time. Russia has come under pressure at the UN Security Council from its ally China. This is something I talked about, something I suggested would be happening, and developing countries as well as Western nations to avert the global food crisis and quickly revive Ukrainian grain shipments. Associated Press reports that Moscow was also criticized by the UN and council members on Friday for attacking Ukrainian ports, Well, they continued to do that, didn't they, last night, after pulling out of the year-old grain deal and destroying port infrastructure in response to Russia declaring wide areas in the Black Sea dangerous for shipping. The UN warned that a military incident in the sea would have catastrophic consequences. China's deputy UN ambassador Geng Shuang expressed hope that Russia and the UN would work together to resume exports from both countries at an early date in the interest of, quote, maintaining international food security and alleviating the food crisis in developing countries in particular. This is important because if Russia are getting pressure from all directions, including um, their allies, essentially, then you would hope that this gets resolved. If China are not happy with Russia, then that's good for allies of Ukraine. Staying on that kind of general topic, Ukraine never gives up on nothing. Ukrainian grain will be transported through Izmail, which is a town just south of Odessa, very close, I think, to the Romanian border, in 70-ton wagons. Actually, it's not so much the Ukraine never giving up. Here's USAID. So the USAID project, within the framework of the economic support, just to let you see that picture more clearly, program for Ukraine purchased 50 modern hopper cars for the needs of the Nibulon company, each of which can carry up to 70 tons of grain. The first 10 of 50 wagons have already been delivered and loaded with grain. They will transport agricultural products through Ismail, and that is obviously by rail. Is not as efficient as doing it by boat. The amounts are smaller, but it will certainly help matters considerably. There is a worry about cheap grain flooding European markets. As long as this grain, gets to its eventual destinations around the world, then that is good. Uh, Talking about what is being discussed internationally, geopolitically, there's a lot of talk about what has taken place in um, in Odessa overnight. Is just terrible footage coming out. Other cultural places being hit. Even in the time I've spent going out today between my videos and coming back, there's more footage coming out that's pretty disgraceful. Also, Polish Deputy Foreign Minister has said his meeting with the Russian ambassador to Poland after he was summoned after Vladimir Putin alleged Poland harbored territorial ambitions in Western Ukraine was very brief. So he was summoned. I talked about that yesterday. You had Vladimir Putin sounding off about Poland and uh, you know not helping matters at all. Just I would say saber rattling, but it's going to annoy the Poles, and I guess that's to the Ukrainian advantage. So as you can see, lots of footage coming out here. Uh, and the damage to the cathedral has annoyed a lot of people. Amnesty International getting involved, which is actually, good because previously they'd kind of sided with Russia, or they were playing the both sides are bad card when they released a report that was roundly condemned. And now that we've seen now we've seen that they are, saying the right things. That's good.